have 2.5 minutes for an opening statement.
All right. Thank you all for being here, and thanks for hanging on to the end. It's always nice to be the closer. Well, today, people are hurting, and the American dream is at risk, and no one knows that more than you and I, those of us who live here in Southwest Washington. To us, unemployed isn't just a concept, it's a friend, it's a family member, it's a brother or a sister. It's some of my most dedicated campaign volunteers. And I'm running for Congress because the folks who run Washington, D.C. right now are making that harder for those folks that I just talked about to find work, not easier. Right now, we have a choice. We have the opportunity to change directions. I'm running because America's being driven to the brink, and I'm ready to help lead us in a new direction. I'm the only person in this race who's willing, I'm the only person in this race who's willing to vote for new leadership in Congress. I'm the person in this race who's willing to vote against costly healthcare mandates, against Obamacare, against cap and trade, and for a balanced budget amendment that's going to create a level playing field, rein in that government spending, and allow job creation to occur. Both candidates are going to talk about jobs. I'm a state representative who has a record of voting not just against wasteful government spending, against tax increases, but for common sense healthcare solutions, for free enterprise solutions that help our economy grow. Records are important. My opponent has voted for tax increases, has voted and supported whether it's health care tax increases, whether it's supported the income tax, and even though folks will talk about a need to spend more money, I've seen our state budgets and our federal budgets, and it just ain't so. We have a chance right now to put our country back on the right course. And you have a choice between a couple of candidates, one with a fresh perspective and with some new ideas, and one who believes that Nancy Pelosi is driving our country in the right direction. That's not me. So I'm excited to be here tonight. I'm excited to take your questions, and I look forward to it. Thanks so much.
For your first question, you will have 2 minutes to respond. What is your view on the recent passage of the health care bill?
Well, I think the health care bill, I have a couple thoughts on this. I think that the president was right to focus on reforming health care. I think he was right. The cost of health care is eating up more and more of family budgets, of business budgets, and this is an area where the Republicans blew it when they had the chance to infuse those free enterprise solutions. When they had control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, they didn't enact those solutions. However, this bill is not the right approach. This bill actually is going to cause you and I, as individuals, if we don't purchase a government-approved plan, to pay almost a $700 fine. It's going to cost businesses in this area a fine per employee if they don't choose a government-approved plan. It's got costly mandates and tax increases on businesses and families. It's already driving up the cost of health care in our premiums between 10 and 13%. We can do better. I would vote to repeal and replace this bill with free market solutions, whether it's association health plans that allow small businesses to band together, pool their resources, and offer health insurance across state lines. That would reduce costs for small businesses without growing the government, without increasing your taxes. I support letting individuals purchase health insurance across state lines. That's something I've worked on here at the state level. And that would drop health insurance costs immediately for folks purchasing in the individual marketplace by around 22%. Again, without growing government, without increasing taxes. We need to let individuals have the same tax breaks that businesses do when it comes to purchasing health insurance, and we need to enact tort reform or medical liability reform in the healthcare system. Those are 4 good free market solutions that don't grow government, don't increase your taxes, and will work to reduce the cost of healthcare for all Americans. It's time that we start over, we reboot, we redo, we replace the healthcare bill that this administration passed with something that's not going to kill jobs, but it's going to get more people access to quality, affordable healthcare.
Representative Herrera, you will have 2 minutes to respond to this question. With Social Security estimated to run out in 2041, most of us in this room will not be able to receive its benefits. What is your plan, if elected, to secure financial protection for us in retirement?
This is a good question. Let me say first and foremost, and this is one you all are going to hear a lot of talk about in this campaign, but let me be clear for the record. I don't support privatizing Social Security. I do support putting Social Security on sound financial footing. What does that mean? I agree that when we're looking into the future, people my age and younger are wondering if Social Security is going to be there for us. Well, I can tell you that we can take steps now to make sure that happens. First things first, politicians of both parties have spent from the Social Security Trust Fund, and both of them have raided it. That's got to stop, and it's got to stop immediately. Secondly, we need to pull back the healthcare bill that jeopardizes Social Security and Medicare. Did you know that $1.2 trillion healthcare bill cuts $500 billion out of Medicare, the program that made Social Security possible? They're both under the same act, different pieces of the act. $500 billion. Right here in Southwest Washington, we have seniors, actually 50% of the seniors here in Clark County, I think it's 49 point something, so right about 50%, have chosen a Medicare Advantage healthcare plan. But because of the Obamacare bill that my opponent supports, it will cut $500 billion out of that immediately. So when it comes to Social Security, it's time to quit the overspending that endanger the promises that this government has made and that many of the seniors in this room have invested into. And I would do just that. Thank you.
Representative Herrera, you again have 2 minutes to answer this question. Recent reports have shown that U.S. education severely lacks in comparison to other countries. As a U.S. representative, what would be your plan to reverse this trend and make sure that we are prepared to conduct international business in the future?
This is a great question. I do believe that in order for us, when we finally get our economy back on the right track by reining in that spending and creating that level playing field, which I'm sure we'll get a question about that we can get more into, we're going to need a workforce that's ready for a 21st century global economy, which means and it was said a little bit earlier, in our state right now, about 70% of the high schoolers are graduating, and about half, roughly, are ready for college-level reading or math. We can do better. Now, as the state and the federal government are concerned, the state is primarily responsible for funding local education, along with you all here, who fund it by the communities. But the federal government is responsible for a couple of pieces. One of them is Title I, which basically is funding to make up the funding gap for poorer kids, and IDEA, which is special ed funding. Right now, your federal government is really, I would say, doing neither appropriately, which means that school districts here, especially Evergreen, Vancouver, are bearing a disproportionate share of the burden for meeting that gap. So when the federal government it says you must supply all the services for special ed students, but it's not going to provide the funding. That money comes out of the general operating budgets for schools. The federal government needs to step up and fund its portion, what it's responsible for, so that schools can then use that money to do what they're trying to do. The other thing that I think we can do is reduce, cut, streamline mandates, especially federal mandates that usually come with no funding attached, but it adds cost and it ties the hands of local administrators who know, or school boards, or superintendents, who know what they want to do, what they have to do to educate our children, but yet they're jumping through hoops that the federal government has put in its place. I'll be an advocate for the government stepping up to fund what it's responsible for at the federal level, but also cutting back mandates that tie the hands of locals, because I believe education is best determined locally by our school boards and by the folks that we vote in to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Herrera, for your final question, you will have 2 minutes to answer. What are your views and plans to combat the growing national unemployment rate?
Well, I'll talk about it here because here we have almost the highest unemployment. If we were a state here in Clark County, we'd be near the top in unemployment numbers. And there are some things we can do. Right now, the federal government needs to enact the tax extenders. So there were tax cuts put into place in 2001 and 2003 that are scheduled to expire at the end of this year. 50% of those who are impacted by those tax cuts are small business owners. Those folks who we want to invest here. We want them to grow here. We want them to spend their time and their resources here. But right now, this is tax season. It's tax planning season for the business cycle. There are businesses who have told me, we have a little bit more, we might be able to hire, but we're not going to do it. Because the federal government keeps sending us signals that they're going to raise our taxes. So we're going to hold on, we're going to put our head down, and we're not going to move. This government needs to send the signal that we're not going to raise or balance our budget on the backs of job creators, and that's something I'd support. Another thing that we need to do is enact a balanced budget amendment. In the last 20 months, this Congress has put more on our federal credit card, the federal debt, than in all 200 years worth of our nation's history combined. I support enacting a balanced budget amendment that requires this Congress to live within its means, just like you and I have to, every single month. And finally, we need to enact fair, reasonable regulation. Not allow some bureaucrat in the Central Planning Office in Washington, D.C. to dictate to us through agencies how we should run our lives, how we should run our businesses, what health care we should choose. Here in Southwest Washington, we have a tremendous timber resource, but the EPA is currently, through rules, telling folks who are trying to pursue biomass that it won't count as a clean energy source. It's going to cost us jobs, and it's certainly going to cost us investment in business growth opportunity, and it's got to stop.
Thank you. Representative Herrera, you now have 30 seconds to close.
This election is not just a chance to determine the outcome of Southwest Washington in this race here, but it's the chance to determine the outcome of our country for the next generation. You have two choices, two strong candidates. I don't question my candidate's motives in any way, but his support for Obamacare, his refusal to oppose cap and trade, his opposition to the balanced budget amendment, is very different from how I've just laid out things to you. Those are your two choices. I can promise you that I will vote and be a voice for you in the other Washington for change. And I encourage you to join with me in helping us change directions this November.
This concludes the Camas Youth Advisory Council.